Have you ever felt completely, utterly exhausted by a conflict with someone, even when you haven't actually spoken to them in days?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
maybe weeks, or honestly, I mean, even years. You haven't exchanged a single word with this person, but somehow just the thought of them leaves you completely drained.
It's a very specific kind of fatigue, It's not the tiredness you feel after a long run or like a tough work day.
Right, it's deeper.
Yeah, it's this heavy weariness of carrying something invisible, almost like you're constantly tensing a muscle you don't even realize you're flexing.
And that invisible weight is exactly what we are getting into on today's deep dive. I was reading this incredibly profound text recently called The Dissolution of Conflict, Unassuming the War Within and Between.
It's a great piece.
It really is. And it just completely shifted how I view this kind of exhaustion. Because, well, it argues that we fundamentally misunderstand what a conflict actually is.
Right, we treat it like an event.
Exactly. Like an argument at Thanksgiving or a tense email chain at work.
Uh-huh.
But the text suggests that conflict is actually a posture.
And when you hold a defensive posture long enough, the ongoing cost of tracking that enemy, of constantly rehearsing your grievances, of fortifying your defenses, it physically and mentally alters you.
It's exhausting.
It really is. The author argues that holding this posture stops being something you're just doing. It becomes an identity. You basically transition into being a combatant.
Okay, let's unpack this because I was thinking about it like a background app running on your phone.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right, you aren't actively looking at the app, you aren't scrolling through it, but it's just sitting there in the background, constantly refreshing, silently pinging the server,
Draining your battery.
secretly draining your battery all the way to zero. And the text says that ending the conflict isn't just about closing the app or winning the argument. It calls ending a conflict an ontological act.
Right, an ontological act, which, refers to a shift in your fundamental state of being.
Meaning,
Meaning you have to actively choose to stop being the person for whom that conflict is the defining reality. Because if we accept that a conflict can drain our battery without an active, ongoing fight,
we have to figure out where it's happened.
exactly, we have to look at the mechanics of where that conflict actually lives. If it's not in the room with you, where is it? And that's where the text introduces this powerful framework called assumed conflict.
Which totally flips the script. Because we tend to think of conflict as a two-player game.
Yeah,
You need an opponent.
right.
But assumed conflict operates almost entirely like a single-player campaign.
A highly immersive one at that. Most conflict is not explicitly chosen. Very few people wake up and decide, I'm going to start a psychological war today.
I would hope not.
Right. Instead, the text points out that conflict is largely inherited or projected or absorbed through assumption. We decide that another person's silence must mean hostility.
Oh, the silent treatment assumption. That's a classic.
Exactly. Or we decide that a simple difference of opinion is a direct personal threat. We project our own unmet needs onto someone else's behavior and just assume they are intentionally doing us wrong.
It's like we are writing a malicious script for the other person in our heads, casting them as the villain, and then getting furious at them for the lines we wrote.
We do this because the human brain completely abhors a vacuum. When we lack clear information, say a coworker gives a brief, unsmiling answer, our pattern recognition software just kicks into overdrive.
And if we have a history of feeling undermined,
Then our brain fills that ambiguous vacuum with the story of being undermined. Assumed conflict is actually the most durable kind of conflict because it doesn't even require the other party's participation. It generates its own evidence.
so the single-player campaign basically provides its own boss fights.
It does. When you enter that state, your perception drastically narrows. The text explains that every single neutral act the other person does is suddenly viewed through this, thick, distorted lens of a grievance. Yeah, so if they hold the door for you, they're being patronizing. If they don't, they're being rude. The assumption becomes a self-sealing loop.
Okay, so the text suggests that the way out of this self-sealing loop is a deliberate practice it calls unassuming.
But wait, before we get to the solution, I really have to ask about the physical reality of this.
Sure.
Because if I'm just imagining the hostility if it's just a story I'm projecting into a vacuum, why does it feel so incredibly real in my body?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. If someone leaves me on read, my heart rate actually goes up. My palms sweat. If it's just an assumption in my head, why is my biology reacting like I'm under a literal physical attack?
Well, that brings us to the most vital mechanical link in this whole process, the soma, or the physical body.
Ah.
The mind tells a story of threat, and the nervous system listens without questioning the source.
It just takes the mind's word for it.
Exactly. The amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, it cannot easily distinguish between a physical predator in the room and, an assumed social threat in your inbox. So to the brain, a missed email is a tiger in the bushes.
Basically, yes. When you assume hostility, your brain signals the adrenal glands to release cortisol and adrenaline.
So the body starts preparing for a physical altercation that is literally never going to happen.
Yes. And at that point, the conflict has migrated. It has moved out of the relationship, out of the conceptual space of your mind, and directly into the biological hardware of your body.
It's almost like an autoimmune response.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to put it.
The body gets confused by a perceived threat and starts attacking its own healthy tissue. The background app isn't just draining the battery anymore, it's literally overheating the hardware.
That autoimmune analogy is spot on, because the body becomes braced. The breath shortens. The war is now happening inside your own tissues, completely independent of the person who supposedly started it.
Wow.
And once it's in the hardware, you cannot resolve it just by logically analyzing it.
Which makes perfect sense of why I can tell myself, hey, it's just a text message, don't worry about it. But my stomach is still tied in knots. Logic doesn't speak the same language as the nervous system.
It really doesn't.
So how do we stop the overheating? The text gives us a roadmap, starting with that concept I mentioned earlier. The first movement, unassuming.
Right. So if assuming is the process of layering narrative over reality, unassuming is the deliberate act of pausing right before your brain makes that automatic interpretation.
Just hitting the brakes.
Hitting the brakes. You have to ask yourself a very difficult grounding question. What am I actually certain of? Not what feels true. What is empirically verifiable?
I found the everyday example the text uses for this so painfully relatable.
The email one.
Yes. So imagine you send an email to a colleague asking an important question. They reply a few hours later, but they completely ignore your question and just talk about a different project.
Happens all the time.
All the time. The verifiable fact, the bare event, is simply the email didn't answer my question.
But the assumption, right, the surplus, meaning we instantly layer on top of that bare event, is the email didn't answer my question because they don't respect me and they're actively trying to sabotage my project.
Right. And the text makes this brilliant distinction. It says the bare event is workable.
Yes.
You could just send a follow-up email saying, hey, you missed my question below. But the surplus meaning, that scenario is a war. You can't just send a casual follow-up email to sabotage.
What's fascinating here is that unassuming is an act of real precision. It is the process of mentally separating the film from the projector.
Like that.
The film is your feeling of disrespect. The projector is the blank event of the missed email. And the text is careful to clarify that unassuming is not about denying your feelings or pretending people are never toxic.
Right. It's not toxic positivity.
Exactly. Your feelings of anger are entirely real. But feelings are not facts. Treating a purely subjective, projected experience as an objective truth is exactly how conflict self-perpetuates.
It's separating the what happened from the what I made it mean. It's not saying don't feel hurt. It's saying notice that you are feeling hurt because of the narrative you added, not necessarily the event itself.
Precisely. Stripping away that surplus meaning starves the conflict of its fuel. It creates mental space.
But, as we established with the autoimmune response, creating mental space doesn't automatically hear the hardware.
No, it doesn't.
Because let's say I do the unassuming.
Right.
I realize, okay, they just missed the question. I am layering my own insecurities about this project onto their busy schedule. My mind gets it, but my jaw is still clenched.
Yeah.
My chest is still tight. Because intellectual reframing rarely dissolves the physical tension.
It rarely does, because the conflict is now living well below the threshold of thought. You cannot logic your way out of a physiological cortisol response.
You can't talk your way out of a physiological response.
Right. The braced chest, the tight jaw, the vigilant scanning of a room when that coworker walks in. These are the ways the soma maintains the conflict completely independently of your rational mind.
So the text suggests the body has to lead the mind out of this, which, I have to be honest, feels totally backward to me.
How so?
I'm so used to thinking I have to logic my way out of a problem, find the solution, and then I can finally relax. But how does the body lead? I mean, I can't just politely ask my adrenaline to leave the premises.
No, you can't. You have to actively manipulate your biology to send a new signal to the brain. Completion of the conflict requires moving through the body. This means deliberate physiological signaling, primarily through the vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve being the superhighway between the body and the brain, right?
Exactly that. When you take slow, deep, diaphragmatic breaths, you are physically stimulating the vagus nerve, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode.
Okay.
You have to consciously, deliberately soften the muscles in your stomach, your shoulders, and your jaw that are holding that readiness to fight. You're making a physical choice to let the body register safety before your mind is fully convinced the environment is safe.
So you're basically hacking the feedback loop.
You really are.
The mind looks at the relaxed body, notices the deep breathing and unclenched jaw, and says, oh, I guess we aren't in danger from this email anymore. We can stand down.
The physical shift, the actual unclenching of the tissues, creates the biological safety required for the brain to finally drop the threat narrative. You can't think your way into a new way of acting. Sometimes you have to act your way into a new way of thinking.
But let's pause and look at the heart of reality here. Because we've talked about assuming hostility from a missed email.
Right.
What if it wasn't an assumption?
Right. What if it was real?
Yeah, what if the verifiable fact is that they actually betrayed you? They stole your idea, or they lied about you to your boss. Relaxing my jaw and breathing deeply doesn't change the fact that a tangible wrong was committed.
No, it doesn't.
Don't we still need an apology to truly move on? I mean, don't they need to admit they were wrong for the conflict to actually end?
This is where the text offers what might be its most radical and liberating thesis. The author states unequivocally that conflict can end without resolution. You do not need the other person's participation to finish the war.
When I first read that, I almost didn't believe it.
It's hard to swallow at first.
It is. The idea that the situation doesn't have to be made fair and the wound does not have to be acknowledged by the person who inflicted it, it goes against everything we are taught about closure.
We are deeply conditioned to believe that closure requires a two-party treaty. We conflate completion with agreement or justice.
Yes.
But the text redefines completion simply as the withdrawal of your investment in the war. You choose to stop spending your biological life force maintaining that defensive posture. Not because your position was wrong, and certainly not because what they did was okay, but because the ongoing cost of holding that posture is destroying you.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text brings up the concept of forgiveness here, but it quickly pivots away from it.
Yeah, it takes a very different angle.
It argues that the word forgiveness carries so much heavy religious and moral baggage that it obscures the mechanics of what's actually happening. It frames this not as some, saintly pardoning of a sin, but as energy reclamation.
Energy reclamation is a much more practical, mechanical way to look at it. You are literally taking back the biological and cognitive bandwidth that was locked up in that braced posture of conflict. You are returning that energy to your present life.
But if we can just reclaim our energy, why is it so agonizingly hard to let go? I mean, why do we crave apologies so desperately? Why do I replay an argument in the shower for 6 months hoping the other person finally realizes how wrong they were?
Because we're human. The text explains that this stems from a fundamental human psychological need. An experience needs to be fully witnessed to be released.
Witness.
Yes. When we are injured, we have a profound need for someone to validate our reality by saying, yes, that happened and it was painful.
And we naturally want the person who caused the pain to be the one to witness it because that feels like justice. It balances the ledger.
Exactly. But in the absence of that apology, which, let's face it, rarely comes, especially from someone capable of that level of betrayal, the psyche just gets stuck in a loop.
It keeps replaying.
Over and over. It replays the injury, frantically searching for the external validation it never received. It's trying to prove to an empty courtroom that it was wronged.
So if the other person refuses to enter the courtroom and witness your pain, what's the alternative? How do you close the loop? The text offers this practice called internal witnessing, which really caught my attention.
Internal witnessing is the act of turning toward your own experience and validating it yourself with the authority you previously reserved for the other person.
So you're giving yourself the apology.
Not an apology, an acknowledgement. It is you actively saying to your own nervous system, that happened, it was real, it was unfair, and it mattered.
Wait, so if I'm internally witnessing my own grievance, how do I avoid just spiraling into self-pity or, fortifying that identity of a victim? Isn't there a danger of just feeding the loop?
It's a fair question, but the difference lies in the intention. Self-pity is a repetitive narrative that seeks external rescue. It says, Look how terribly I was treated. Someone needs to fix this.
Okay, I see.
Internal witnessing is an act of self-rescue. It is definitive. You aren't telling the story to keep it alive. You are telling it to file it away. You are providing the acknowledgement your psyche is starting for so that it no longer needs to seek it from the person who hurt you.
It's completion through self-truth. And once the experience is fully witnessed and validated by you, the loop finally closes. The psyche stops searching.
It loses its gravitational pull, which leads us to the ultimate question: what does a permanent ending actually look like? When you've done the unassuming, separated the surplus meaning, used your breath to release the somatic hold, and internally witnessed your own experience, how do you know the war is really over?
The text has a beautifully clear metric for this. You know a conflict has permanently ended when you can recall the memory of what happened, and it carries information rather than a somatic charge.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, information rather than charge is the key. This is the difference between true integration and mere dissociation.
Dissociation being like just ignoring it.
Right. Dissociation is trying to push the memory away, staying numb, or pretending it didn't hurt. Integration means the event has been completely metabolized by your nervous system.
Like remembering that a stove is hot. The memory carries essential information to keep you safe in the future,
Yeah.
but your hand doesn't physically burn when you think about the stove.
Precisely. You can speak about what happened clearly, perhaps even set a firm boundary with that person, but your body doesn't automatically re-enter a fight or flight posture.
You're safe.
The event belongs to the past as a historical fact. It is no longer a live wire running current into your present day.
It's a dead wire.
Mm-hmm.
You know it's there, but it can't shock you anymore. And the text poses this ultimate challenging question to you, the listener. Am I willing to be at peace even if nothing changes?
That's the real test.
It is. Saying yes to that isn't giving up. The author calls it sovereignty. You become the sovereign ruler of your own internal state. The conflict ends not because the world suddenly rearranged itself to be fair, but because you stopped waiting for it to do so.
Sovereignty is the ultimate goal. When you wait for someone else to change or for an apology to arrive, you are handing them the keys to your nervous system. You put them in charge of your biology. Doing the internal witnessing and relaxing your own soma, that is you taking the keys back.
You're taking back your battery life. As we wrap up this deep dive, the sheer practicality of this text is what really stays with me. Holding on to conflict is an active physical posture that drains your energy. Learning to separate the verifiable facts from the emotional assumptions is a superpower that stops you from generating your own enemies.
It really is a superpower.
And most importantly, you have the sovereign right to reclaim your energy. You do not need to wait for an apology. You can validate your own experience, soften your own body, and declare the war over. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration today. Wherever you are right now, take a second, take a deep breath, drop your shoulders, unspool the narrative, and enjoy the rest of your day.
And as you go about that day, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We've spent this time exploring how our bodies can unconsciously hold on to the posture of conflict and stress for years. But what would happen if we reversed the mechanism? What if you consciously started practicing the physical posture of peace? The relaxed jaw, the deep vagal breath, the open chest before a conflict even begins. Could actively preparing your body for peace actually alter the types of conflicts you encounter out in the world?